Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am the host, Andy Steele, and we have a lot of interest around the 9/11 Truth Movement in this interview tonight. We're going to be talking to Richard Rotanz. He was the deputy at the Office of Emergency Management on September 11th. Actually went into World Trade Center 7, saw a lot of very interesting things here. So we're going to have a lot of questions for him. And even though he does not agree with our conclusions that it was brought down in a controlled demolition on that day, either World Trade Center 7 or the Twin Towers, he still has his name on this document here calling for a presidential commission to look into the events of the World Trade Center destruction, because he thinks that NIST got it wrong as well. And so it's going to be a very fascinating interview tonight. Of course, let me first bring in my trusty sidekick here, Craig McKee. Craig, thank you so much for joining us. And again, if you have any questions during this, Craig, feel free to jump in and ask them.
Okay.
And then we're going to be, let's go ahead and bring our guest in. Dr. Richard Rotanz is president of an emergency management consulting firm and an advisor to Maritime Engineering Company. He has served in the following roles in his career. He was a program manager for the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, executive director, Applied Sciences Foundation of Homeland Security, special advisor for the provost at Adelphi University in developing their master's degree in emergency management, founding commissioner of Nassau County Office of Emergency Management, and deputy commissioner, New York City Office of Emergency Management, overseeing emergency planning and research. And directing EOC operations, and FDNY as a company commander with special units such as Safety Command Research and Special Rescue Units. So he has a very decorated career. Of course, like I said, he was there on September 11th. So let's go ahead and bring him on in. Mr. Rotanz, thank you so much for coming on the show and joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
All right. So again, I said this during the opening. A lot of people in the 9/11 Truth Movement know about this interview this week, asking me to ask you a lot of questions about your experience on that day. With OEM, you were responsible for research and planning. You also organized and managed the Emergency Operations Center during major events, which I think we can all agree 9/11 was there in New York City on that day. This is a very unique role. So please just tell our audience about your experience on that day, how you heard the news, and what you went through while this unfolded.
Yeah, no problem. That morning, myself and two colleagues, we were reviewing a biodefense drill that we were having the following day. And as we're sitting there, I'm looking out the north window and saying, this jet that's coming is kind of very low. And with that, you hear the jet screaming above us and hits Tower 1. And that was maybe about 100 yards away. And I had told my staff to get the EOC ready. And I went down to the lobby of Tower 1 to set up the command post with the fire safety director. The biggest hazard at that time going from Tower 7 to 1 were the jumpers. There were dozens of people jumping out of the windows. In fact, the first fireman that was killed by a jumper. While I was at the fire safety director, I met up with Chief Joe Pfeiffer, who was previously conducting a drill out the streets where they saw the plane hit. And we both set up the command center. And after he gets his act together and they see my Commissioner Shumman, I go back to Tower 7. And with that, I told the security people of Tower 4, 5, and 7 to get out. You have to evacuate. We don't know what's going on here. And as I'm telling that, we now get hit by the second plane. So now I have two towers that were hit, and I had to go. When I went upstairs back to Tower 7, I told all my staff, get your gear, your laptops, and just go. Go downstairs and go north. Myself and my partner, Rick Byler, we went back to Tower 7. And at the time, we saw Father Judge, who died of a heart attack that morning, Joey Pfeiffer and a bunch of the guys. They went in one direction, and myself and Rick went into a different direction. With that, we heard a horrendous noise, and we realized that the building around us is falling down. We were under the impression that it was the top of Tower 1 that collapsed, not realizing it was Tower 2 that came down crushing. We had to dig ourselves out, forced the doors, and eventually left that building to get out, and went down the outside escalator, went around the back of Tower 7, and trying to find out where the command post is, not realizing that we just lost a bunch of good fellas. After about a half an hour or so, we noticed that here comes Tower 1 collapsing, and all we had to do was evacuate it. We were in a cloud of dust that was just got unbearable. And meanwhile, my two sons that are on the job, they were at the scene. They were told I was killed, and I was told they were killed. And eventually, we caught up with each other on West Vesey Street, and we realized everybody was safe. That myself, I went back down to Broadway and Vesey, and I looked up, and here comes Tower 1 coming down. I go, my God, the whole building. Not realizing the two already came down. And I see Tower 1 coming down, and we had to run fast going down to Vesey Street and make a right turn and avoid the collapse. And that was, the biggest part of that day, realizing that later on, the chief of department, Pete Hayden, along with a few other officers, asked me to take two chiefs into Tower 7 to see if it would be viable to commit manpower into that building. And realizing in the back of my head how many guys we lost, not realizing that it was several hundred. I figured maybe 100 guys, maybe 50. I had no idea it was 343 guys. But myself and two chiefs went into Tower 7. We got as far as walking the stairs up the floor 8. And we could hear upstairs the creaking and the creaking sounds of the building getting very weak. Looking at the south wall, we saw huge gaping holes bigger than Mack trucks and hanging beams and columns. And there was an elevator box that was blown down the hallway out of the elevator shaft. So I don't think people really realized there was gaping holes in Tower 7's facing towards the south, because when one came down, it did a lot of punishment to that. And we said to ourselves, this is going to be coming down. I had no idea when, but we got out, notified the chief that we got to back out because this building is not it's not going to stand that much longer because it got insulted from Tower 1. And that's basically in a nutshell. Afterwards, I had to rebuild the Emergency Operations Center, 1092, and manage 120 organizations for the next few months. Other than that, it wasn't a bad day.
Now, I want to focus in on this elevator box that was blown out from the elevator shaft. Now, I have a difficult time doing this myself, trying to come up with distances based off of memories and stuff. You say blown down the hallway. Like, what was this? Like 30 feet, 40 feet, would you estimate? Or would it be shorter?
I would say probably about 10 yards, 30 feet that it was down the hallway. The elevator shaft was gone for about 3 or 4 floors.
It was gone. Now, where was the elevator located in World Trade Center 7? Was it towards the exterior more, or was it towards the center?
It was the center core elevator that was found.
Okay. Now, also, you said that you've seen gaping holes in the building and columns dangling. Was this just on from looking on the outside in, or was this while you were in the building? Where were the columns broken inside this building?
I was looking from the 8th floor, and every floor we went down, we saw the exact same thing. You could look up various parts of Tower 7 to see the same thing. Okay.
So, but was it was it far away from the damage from where Tower 1 had hit the building, or was it closer to that damage? Was this kept exclusively towards that area?
Tower 1 would have collapsed. A lot of the Tower 1 fell onto Tower 7 from the 40th floor all the way down. And you had gaping damage throughout the front of that building, which is facing south. You don't have any video of that. That's, the only video you have is looking at the north side of the building when the building came down.
Okay. Now,
Andy,
go ahead.
Can I just a clarification? How would the debris, if it's on the south face, how would the debris from the other side of the building land on the south face of the tower? I'm just trying to picture this.
The way I can explain it is that here's my hand, here's the south, the north, and the building collapsed like a closing fist. And if you look at the damage, you can see the whole face of the north side of Tower 7 on the ground. So it came down, but it came down like a closing fist.
But you said there were gaping holes in the south side of the building.
Facing
how would the debris create holes on the other side of the building is what I'm trying to figure out. Unless I'm getting my directions mixed up.
I think the directions are long. The video you see is the north side of the building. The
Right.
south side of the building is facing the rest of the plaza of Tower 1 and 2.
Oh, okay. So
Right.
I'm okay.
Okay.
I was
So,
confused there. All right. Yeah.
all right. So, I just want to clarify. So, you were the one who gave the order to stop the firefighting operations in World Trade Center 7. Is that correct?
I was myself and a deputy chief and a battalion chief recommended to the chief of department not to send anybody in there.
Okay. And I guess, can you elaborate just in terms of based off of the conditions that you had seen? Was it a concern that, the Tower 1 and Tower 2 had already come down? This building was going to come down, correct? Was your assessment to pull the firefighters?
We were under the impression that this building was not going to be viable to put more manpower in there. We lost a lot of people, and we didn't trust the integrity of this building. We said this building could probably come down just like the other two.
Okay. Now, do you know what time you gave the order to? First of all, who gave the order to evacuate the building? Because I guess there's a distinction between stopping firefighter operations and evacuating the building. Would that have fallen under you or somebody else?
When I left Tower 1, going back in, I saw security. I said, pass it on that we got to evacuate 4, 5, and 7 and tell everybody to go north. That was around the beginning of the whole event. Around lunchtime, like 12:30 or so, we advised the chief of department, Pete Hayden, and other staff chiefs not to commit any manpower to Tower 7. It wasn't worth it. And there was no argument. They didn't commit anybody. And plus the fact we lost hydrant mains, gas mains, power lines, communication lines. We lost a lot of the infrastructure. So there wasn't any water going to be used.
Okay. Do you know what time that would have been estimating, like they would have given that order?
This was around 12:30 so that we told the chiefs. So there was no order to commit anybody in there.
Okay. Now, did you or anyone you were aware of when you were inside Building 7 making this assessment, did you take any photographs while you were in there?
No.
Or was it just, there was no, okay. Now, if fires were present in Building 7 and there was no structural damage on that day, would you still have, or like getting into hypotheticals, if there had been fires but no structural damage that you're describing in this, how would this have influenced the decision to stop the firefighting operations?
Well, first of all, there was no water pressure. There was loss of water to that area when the towers 1 and 2 came down. Like I said, they broke hydrant mains, gas mains, electrical, and so on. So it wouldn't have been worthwhile to send anybody up there until they get some decent amount of water flow. Plus the fact you got to start pumping water up 40 some odd floors.
Okay. Now, if you were convinced that the building were structurally compromised, that it risked collapsing, the kind of collapse that we saw and we've seen in all the videos, straight down, symmetric, is this collapse that we witnessed the kind of collapse that you envisioned happening later on? Like the way it looked in real life, is this what you saw in your mind beforehand, or was it different?
No, I just said it's going to collapse. I had no vision of how it's going to come down. Partially collapsed, full collapse. I had no thought about process. I was just going around trying to find my personnel, set up a command post, and get ready to get the EOC going.
Okay. Now I want to play a video for you, and a lot of people in the movement focus in on this. And I don't say this isn't weird, whatever. I don't focus on this personally myself because this gets into trying to interpret what a guy means. It's not really based on scientific evidence. But I'm going to play this clip for you, and then I have a question to follow up. This is about, I think, a minute long.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
All right. So later on, when Larry's asked about this, because it's a strange term, it's not really a firefighting term, from what I understand. Pull. If you're going to pull the firefighters, you'd say pull them out, whatever. But Larry Silverstein said, I was talking about pull the firefighters out, and we watched the building collapse later on. But in this clip, it almost sounds like they're consulting with Larry about this. And I guess my question is how much role does the owner of the building, that's who this is, have in making a decision like this? And how much of a role do you know that Larry had in making that call to pull the firefighters?
Well, the owner of a building, no matter regardless of what it is, it could be a bodega, it could be a school, it could be a high-rise building. That person or persons is very valuable to us to find out, what do you have in the building? Is there any hazardous materials? Is there daycare centers and so on? What do we need to know? Standpipes, sprinklers, fuel, the whole bit. I don't know of any conversation that he had with the staff chiefs. I mean, like I said, I'm very concerned about where my staff was, how many people we lost, and to get the EOC up and running, which took a couple of days.
Okay, so you don't know how much of a role he really played in that call, but ultimately the decision is up to you and your team to make that determination, correct?
Up to the chief of the department, correct.
All right, very good.
Were there actually firefighters in the building, Richard, like at any point? Like, in other words, the idea of pulling firefighters out, if there were never any in there, then that statement wouldn't make a lot of sense, would it?
The statement doesn't make any sense, because when we went in there was nobody in the building at all.
Right.
Just us
Right.
three. Earlier, you had people there that were, because you had federal agencies that had the CIA had a place, Secret Service, they had to get their stuff out of the building. Other than that, there's no firefighters were ever committed, to my knowledge, and I doubt it did happen, to go into Tower 7.
All right, so there's a lot of reports around the scene that morning of explosions. We actually, and I should have the clip, I don't, but we have this caught on video with firefighters clearly hearing explosions while they're gathered around a payphone that day. This is before Building 7 actually came down. One of them says, "We got to get out of here, 7 is exploding." They're obviously very panicked as they say this. Did you hear any accounts of your own explosions, hear them going off that morning, or know anybody that described this?
No, in fact, with all these videos I've been getting, and people, I'm being inundated with a lot of people, talk about explosions. This is the first time in almost 24 years I've heard of this.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about your critique of the NIST report, because you don't agree with what NIST did either. Can you describe why this is?
After in 2002, I was asked by the county executive in Nassau County to help him build an office of emergency management. And with that, we had our office located in East Meadow, and I get a phone call from the county attorney that New York City Core Council wants to come and visit with me, with people from NIST. Do you have a problem with that? I go, no, not really. So he shows up with 4 other PhD folks, very nice people, polite, and they're asking me questions just like you are about Tower 7. And they're trying to find out what went wrong. I go, well, do you have photographs? Do you have floor plans of the building? And he said, no. I go, so how are you going to come to this? What's your research question about what you're trying to look for? And what's your process of doing your research? They didn't have any floor plans, no photographs. And I was one of the first interviews. So I'm like, kind of questioning like what they're all about. I had floor plans. I had copied the floor plans of Tower 7, specifically of the 23rd floor. And I gave it to him. I go, here, take a floor plan. They'll help you. But you got to call up NYPD and then an FDNY to the photo units to see if they had any photographs of Tower 7 before it came down. I was beside myself. So they left. I get a phone call. I forget who was in charge of the of NIST at the time, saying thank you very much, the whole bit, but we're going to redo our report. Okay. But, the report they have is just, it doesn't grab me that they really did a good job. That's all.
I mean, I know this is speculating, but why wouldn't they do a good job? I mean, if you go from the official story standpoint, maybe Building 7 then isn't as important as the 2 buildings that were 3,000 people died in, right? But you still want to try to give an accurate accounting to the American people. So just speculating a little bit, why do you think that they would not have given it their all in putting this together and trying to do a good job so that people aren't talking about it so many years later?
Well, it's not just NIST. I've been dealing with other entities of the federal government. I don't really have too much confidence. CDC, NIOSH, and so on. And with NIST, when they came out with the report, I wasn't surprised. And were they held back? Couldn't tell you. I couldn't even speculate.
Okay. So I guess the question would be then, because obviously you don't believe the controlled demolition analysis. Why did you agree to be part of this effort to reinvestigate the destruction of these towers on that day?
Well, I was asked by the author of the book you were just showing here and a bunch of the people if I could just sit in and give my opinion. Says, okay, I mean, they're being open up to get all different opinions, whether it's pro or con. That's all. I think it's admirable that they're doing that.
Okay, so well, this is the thing, because I've had people who don't agree with our analysis on this show before, and some people are more hostile about it than others. I like the fact that we can just talk about this. And I had somebody who was a little bit more hostile to us than you are, obviously. And one of the things I got him tripped up on, as I said, if there's a problem, well, first of all, considering this is a mass murder and one of the most important events in American history, if there were things that were wrong in the NIST report, what is the problem with just simply rerunning the analysis so that we get it accurate? And the person said, well, there's nothing ever wrong with rerunning the analysis. I said, well, why don't you sign your petition, because this is all that we are asking for. And the person got kind of tripped up on that because it's so darn reasonable. So I guess I want to know your thoughts on that entire line of thinking, because there's some people that don't like us for asking these questions or coming to these conclusions out there. Why should people, I guess, take more of the attitude that you are taking right now, very graciously coming on our show and giving your account, giving your opinions and stuff, and joining in this call for a new investigation? Why should they be joining up with the people at saying, hey, we think it's a controlled demolition?
Well, you're going to get people's opinions, and what one side or the other. And if you do another research job on this, it wouldn't hurt. Look at all the data that NIST did. Look at all the data, the fire, police, what were their records and so on. They should incorporate all the agencies that were there, EMS, sanitation. Sanitation was a big agency. They took all that 1.2 million tons of debris over to Staten Island landfill. I mean, look at the ME's office. There's a lot of agencies that have done such amount of collection of information. Let's bring them all into place and see where we go with that. I'm all for it.
Okay. So is there anything particularly offensive about coming to the conclusion that it's controlled demolition if it's based off of actual research, in your view?
It's not offensive, no. I mean, I haven't read the whole thing yet, but that's not offensive.
Well, could you elaborate? Because I'm going to tell you, when we first started asking these questions, and we would bring this evidence to various people would have a hostile reaction. Just saying, look, there's something weird about the way Building 7 comes down. Why don't we test the dust for, in the case of the Twin Towers, test the dust for the presence of incendiaries or explosives, just to rule it out? NIST refused to do this. And they use the circular logic saying that, well, we don't expect to find it, so we're not going to do the tests. Why wouldn't you just test it, just to, not to make sure that this wasn't utilized? But people would be very upset about this. So this is why it's such a breath of fresh air to talk to you right now, because, we're on different sides of this debate, but you're saying that there's nothing wrong with coming to this conclusion and wanting the government to address the evidence that we are bringing to the table. So I guess if you could just elaborate, what would you have to say to those people who viciously attack this and say that we shouldn't be giving the time of day to people like me and Craig and the 3,600 architects and engineers that we're representing?
I would tell these people to calm down, just listen and read what has been being brought about. And if there has to be more research to be done with this, let's do it. But who's going to be controlling the research? Who's going to be doing the writing? Who's going to be doing the recording? That's all. I mean, to be hostile, no. I got better things to do than to get mad over this.
That's perfect. Okay, and I guess in a final question here, is it important to look into these issues? Like, this is something that I always say to people that don't agree with me, is that obviously there's issues with the case of World Trade Center 7. One of the things is NIST is giving us this collapse scenario where this the flames got so hot in a particular area of the building that it pushed a beam from a girder, crashed onto the floor, and it caused this internal structure to fall first, and then the external structure. But you can look at a video from an hour before, and it looks like the fires are all burnt out in the area where they say this collapse started. Well, there's a major problem with this because you don't have raging fires, you don't have thermal expansion to push the girder off the seat. So that needs to be reworked. There's issues like this in the case of the Twin Towers as well. And so, I guess my argument there is like, when you don't address obvious flaws in your report, this is what leads to conspiracy theories. Now, I happen to agree with this particular one, right? And I believe that after a real investigation, they will come to this conclusion. But even with other things, when the government takes an arrogant attitude and ignores observable facts and just puts out something that doesn't stand up to science, well, people are going to draw their own conclusions from this, and this makes us less secure as a country than just answering our questions, addressing that evidence. That is my argument. Since you agreed to be a part of this effort and have your name in here, why do we need to revisit this so many years later, 24 years after the event took place?
Why? People are revisiting it, and they call upon me to ask, what's my opinion, what's my experience, and so on. I never thought of any of this until about a month or two ago when people started calling me from the West Coast and other parts of the country and other entities. Fine, but I didn't give it any thought until now. But if it's worthwhile doing this, you had other factors of the government when they were telling the troops down at the hole or the World Trade Center site that don't worry about the smoke and dust, it's not that bad. Really? Common sense means you don't stick your head in a fire pit and so on at a cookout. It's smoke, it's dust, and there's a lot of issues that's coming from that. There was a lot of issues that were going on that day that not too many people realize. One, you had Hurricane Michelle come up the coast. We had 2 earthquakes went through Queens and the Bronx. You had this white powder calls hundreds and hundreds of days. So you had so many things that are going active. The one guy from the Army Corps of Engineers says that the slurry wall is very, very weak. If it collapses, it's going to drown 2,000 guys that are working on the pit. You had 160,000 tons of Freon, a few floors below the plaza, that if it's getting hot, it could turn into phosgene. And phosgene is a very deadly poison, and it also shock sensitive. So if it does go off, you get to level a couple of other buildings as well. So the dynamics was immense, and trying to keep the guys safe, trying to keep the guys comfortable, rotate them every 8 hours or 12 hours or so on, because a lot of the guys didn't want to leave. And then when you had Giuliani say stop digging, the fireman was saying, "Nah, we're not going to stop digging." There was a big brouhaha between the cops and firemen for about a day or so. So there was a lot of things that were going on that drew our attention for other issues, but we still had to manage the response and try and find anybody that might be still alive. We knew that after 12 hours, we were done.
Wow. It is so just horrible to think about the things that you witnessed on that day. I've said this on previous things. I've got this issue with vertigo. If I go to the edge of on a really tall building and there's a railing, I got an issue with looking over the railing. I can get on an airplane just fine, but to just imagine being faced with the choice of either burning alive inside a building or jumping out and falling 110 stories, I cannot imagine it. And I can't imagine what that memory is like for you to have experienced that on that day. And to me, that's what it's all about, is about those people who died on that day and getting justice for them by actually doing a real investigation into why they died, getting the real facts about that instead of what we got from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Now, we focused a lot on World Trade Center 7. Regarding the NIST analysis on the Twin Towers, do you have any opinions on that specifically regarding what they have to say, what happened with 1 and 2?
No, nothing. I went through it and I just closed it up. Wasn't impressed, so I stopped reading it. Even though they keep sending me more reports, but that's it. All
right. Well, okay. I guess I've kind of blown through my questions for you. Craig, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to. I'm just want to get a clearer idea in my head about your kind of movements on the day. Did I understand correctly that you started in Building 7? You were there, like that was where you were when things started to happen?
The Office of Emergency Management was on the 23rd floor of Tower 7.
Right.
We were having a couple of coffee and talking about a drill the next day. So when the plane hit, like I said, sent my staff to reorganize the EOC, and I went downstairs to Tower 1 to meet up with Joe Pfeiffer and set up a command post. So that was the beginning. The biggest hazards, as mentioned, were the people jumping from the tower of Tower 1 at the time. Tower 2 did not get hit yet.
And when you say the EOC, that was in the lobby of, in the lobby of one of the towers, or am I?
No, the Emergency Operations Center was on floor 23rd floor.
Right.
7. I went down to the Fire City Directors on the first floor of Tower 1 to set up a command post for the incoming units.
That's what I meant. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. So, what I'm curious about is Building 7. Like we heard from the account that Barry Jennings gave, that when he went into Building 7, it was completely empty. And I think he even said there were like half-eaten sandwiches or something when he went into the 23rd floor. So what I'd like to know is, how did that building get evacuated? Like who gave the order to get everybody out of that building, and when did that happen?
When I went back to Tower 7 after setting up the command post with Joey Pfeiffer, I saw security. I go, listen, just tell 4, 5, and 7 to get out and go north. All right. That was, and they knew who I was. And I went up to Tower, the 23rd floor. I told my staff to evacuate. Take what you have to get, go downstairs, and go north. That's where the evacuation started.
And that would have been, there would have been the whole building. It wouldn't have just been the 23rd floor, right? It would have been.
Security could evacuate the whole building.
I see. And that would be fairly early on in the morning after, because the North Tower was 8:46. It was hit, right? So how long after that would you have been doing that?
Probably like 9:10, 9:15 or so.
Okay. Right. And I just wondered, maybe just to go back to the, you mentioned the holes in the south face, and I was getting my south and my north mixed up before. So now I'm a little clearer on what you were saying. I mean, my understanding was that the bulk of the damage from falling debris was kind of on one corner of the building. Did you say that you saw like holes in the middle of the building, or what? Could you sort of describe, I guess, the damage that you saw?
The damage was that there was holes that were made in the front of the building facing south that were bigger than Mack trucks. And some of them were like 3 or 4 floors high and just as wide. And it was, where my vantage point was pretty close towards the center. And that's when we told ourselves, we're getting out of here.
The way that it came down, did it look like what you would have expected? Because it all came down kind of symmetrically. Like, if the damage was on one side, did it look weird to you?
If you look at the debris as the Tower 7 goes down, the north side of the tower is laying flat for quite some distance. So it came down like a closed fist. All right. It's not that symmetric, but it was closed fist. And that's where you saw, and most of that was into Vesey Street and on top of the plaza as well.
Now, when you say a closed fist, are you talking about it crumpling on itself? I'm trying to put it all together here, what you're saying.
It's going down like this. All right.
Okay.
It looks symmetrical, but it caves in on itself just before it hits the ground.
All right.
That's
so
Those and pictures you have is from the north side. You don't have that from the south side. If you had that from the south side, a lot of this discussion would be occurring.
All right. Well, in the NIST models, though, they have it crumpling in on itself like a soda can. I don't know if you've seen those models, those computer models from World Trade Center from NIST. If you have seen them, is that accurate in your opinion?
Haven't seen them.
Okay. Okay, so I guess because this is one of the things I think Craig is trying to get at, is that in the NIST reports, they acknowledge the damage on the corner of the building, but they say this only had a marginal role in I don't even remember the exact terminology, but it didn't have much of a role in initiating the collapse, because on the opposite side of the building, you have the penthouse that falls first, right? So they say that the collapse initiated on the side that was opposite from where this damage took place. And even though we don't agree with NIST's ultimate conclusions, we have to agree with that because of that penthouse that drops. I guess what would be your answer to NIST and to AE 9/11 Truth in that assertion based on what you saw?
Get another report done. Conduct the research collectively, like I mentioned before, amongst the federal, state, and city agencies, and have somebody or some entity control the research. What are the research questions? All right. What are the photographs you have? What are the interviews you have done? Any videos? I don't see it in one particular pot. You do a dissertation. The first chapter is, what are you going to do? What's the whole story about? The second one, what's your reading? Third one is that, what's going to be your research? Well, what's going to be the research? And then how are you going to do it? And then what's the conclusions? It's all over the place. It's kind of crazy. And the truth is in this and so on. They're all good people. They want to try and find out the truth. And so do I. All right. And many options, because I've lost so many friends. I just buried 2 guys in the last 2 months from 9/11 disease and so on. I'm doing it every, a couple of times a year. I'm getting tired of it. And, unfortunately, I survived. Unfortunately, my kids survived it too. But, I think that it should be done. All right, even though it's 23, 24 years later, I think more information can come out of it.
Now, have you watched the film Calling Out Bravo 7? I know it's being mentioned a lot on shows like Tucker Carlson and such, that gets into the issues that we bring up regarding Building 7. Have you seen that film?
No, I got a hold of it. I'm going to take a look at that too.
Okay. And I privately I did talk about this, but I want to just do this on the show too, because there's questions about the availability of water to fight the fires on that day. And if you watch Bravo 7 film, they make a very good case that water should have been available to fight these fires. And so just for the sake of the audience here, what do you know about the water availability to fight the fires in Building 7 on that day?
The only thing I know about the water to fight any fires was that hydrants were damaged. Like I said before, gas mains and power lines and so forth damaged, and they had to call in the fireboats to relay 5-inch hose to the super pumpers and so on to the units. And that's the only thing I know about any type of water. Other than that, I was working with the guys in Tower 7 to see what any commitment would be done, and then later on to find out where my staff has been gone, what they go to. There was a lot of things that were going on that, water was important, but it wasn't the first thing in my mind.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much. Oh, go ahead.
Well, before we, I want to ask a little more clarification, if it's okay, on the elevator and the elevator shaft, because that I don't think a lot of people know about that, and so maybe you could describe like how you came across that damage and describe as best you can sort of what it looked like.
We came out of the staircase on the 8th floor, and this would be on the east side of Tower 7. We walked across, which we did every other floor, and we came upon an elevator car, which was about 20, 30 feet away from an elevator shaft that was not there. 3 floors. I could look up 3 floors. There was no floors. There was no elevator shaft. So this was blown out of the elevator shaft. Our main concern was there anybody in there? So we had some tools, forced open. Unfortunately, there was nobody in there. But that's it on that.
So there was so if you walked up to where the elevator had been, it was just a shaft, like an empty shaft?
There was a hole going down where the shaft was, and also going up a few flights. And the car was down the hallway on its side.
So what could have caused that hole? Like, what could have created that hole?
The debris coming down from Tower 1. That was the only thing that could possibly occur, was the massive amount of debris coming down from Tower 1 onto Tower 7.
But wouldn't that create a hole in the building that you could like look out if it was from debris from?
There was gaping holes in the side of Tower 7 that were the size of Mack trucks. All right.
Right.
And where the elevator shaft was not too far from that south wall. There was a gaping hole there, and there was no elevator shaft, just an elevator car.
But would there be a connection between the shaft and the outside of the building, like where you could see that the debris had, hit the elevator? Like it's hard. I'm trying to picture it.
The debris that came from Tower 1 was everywhere, so we didn't have the time. We were there. Walk up 8 floors and walk 8 floors down. That's how long we were there. We were there. We were not there that long. We wanted to get out because the whole building was creaking and it didn't sound good and we didn't feel safe.
Okay.
How big was this debris that you saw? How big was the debris that was in Building 7 when you came? Because, when the buildings are coming down in the videos, we see a lot of pulverized concrete that is, surrounding these steel members that eventually end up rested at ground zero there. So if you were to, estimate, were they small, large, size of a car, bigger than that?
There was
within Building 7
on the 8th floor and the 7th floor. There were just large chunks of debris, part of 7 and part of 1. Like small rocks up until like the size of a car.
Size of a car. Okay. All right.
Wow.
Well, Craig, do you have any other questions?
Well, one thing I was, and I didn't think about this in advance, but I remember hearing that FEMA had people in New York City for some kind of, I don't know I can't remember now if it was an exercise or some kind of reason that they had been brought in, and they were brought in they arrived on the 10th of September. Is that something you are aware of, or did you?
FEMA Region 2 headquarters was about 10 blocks away. They were at Federal Plaza. All right, so they were in the city all the time. And like I said, we were having a major drill on the 12th, and they were going to be there involved as well to watch.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, this is such a rare opportunity because we talk to people off the air sometimes who were there, but to have such a somebody that was right at the heart of this entire event, giving us his account, giving us some details that we had never heard before, like this elevator being blown out of the shaft, is something that is fascinating everybody in the 9/11 Truth movement. So I want to commend you, sir, for taking the time, subjecting yourself to sort of these questions, and it kind of feels like a trial or some kind of police report we're filling out here. But a lot of people very interested, and they want to pick apart these details that you are providing to us. So I guess I'm just going to conclude the interview by asking you, is there any final message you want to share with our audience?
That's about it. We covered everything that I went through. And like I said, they're going to conduct another research on this job. It should be done multifaceted, and one entity should be in control of it.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we get that with this here presidential commission on 9/11, or if we get it in the Congress, that is okay too. But this issue has lingered over this country for so long. It's about time to address it, and for everybody to lay their cards on the table and get at the truth. Richard Rotanz, thank you so much for coming on 9/11 Free Fall.
You're welcome.
Hit that notification bell and slam the like button and subscribe. Thanks.